Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's speaker series. You are here live with me, Renee Rogers. I'm the head curator here at the Birthplace of Country Music Museum. We've got Scotty Almany on tech in the background, taking care of all of that for us. And most importantly, we have Scott Paulson, who I will introduce to you all in just a minute. First off, I want to do just a very quick bit of housekeeping. We're very glad to see you, and thank you for joining us tonight. It's really great to have you here with us. Please stay muted and go ahead and turn your video off during the presentation, and that way it's just a little bit less distracting. It'll stay on the two of us who are talking continually instead of focusing in on other people. So just be sure and mute yourself and go ahead and turn your videos off for now. Thank you. If you have any questions for Scott during the course of the presentation and the conversation we're going to have, please put those in the chat box for Zoom. Scotty has also put some information there about the museum and other things that are relevant to this speaker series. But if you have any questions, put them in the chat box and we will get to those afterwards. You'll get a chance to share all of your questions with Scott, and he will be happy and thrilled to answer them. And then finally, after the presentation, in a day or two, we will send out a feedback survey that should only take you 2 or 3 minutes to just give us some feedback on the program tonight and how that's gone for you and what you enjoyed and what you would like to see in the future. That really helps us with future planning for our events and for the programs that we provide at free and low cost to our online virtual community and for our community here in Bristol at the Birthplace of Country Music Museum. So, saying all that, I am going to do a quick introduction of our speaker tonight, Scott Paulson, who you can see there in the background. Wave at us, Scott.
Hello?
Hello. Actually, say something really quickly, Scott, because I'm not sure that you came through that time.
Yes, I'm Scott Paulson.
Okay,
and I'm about to be introduced.
You came through that time. I just wanted to be sure the audio was working before we got started. Okay, so I will give you a quick intro, and then we'll be back ready to talk. Scott Paulson has spent more than 4 decades at the University of California in San Diego, first as a student studying music and linguistics, and today as the exhibits and events coordinator for the campus's iconic Geisel Library. For those of you who don't know, Ted Geisel was Dr. Seuss. Scott has been part of the library's special events around National Kazoo Day for the past few years, starting off from a challenge to use serious library tools to investigate a light and playful topic. The library's Kazoo Salute has included exhibits, live kazoo performances, and the commissioning of original kazoo music. I'm pretty sure those are things you never expected to hear me say, but it's exciting. Here's how Scott and I met. He actually was very, very helpful to me either a year or two ago, sometime during the pandemic. We were doing a blog post in our series called Instrument Interviews, and those are blog posts where we ask an instrument 10 questions and the instrument answers for us. And I was looking for cool pictures of kazoos online, and I found one of Scott's exhibits on the internet. And I reached out to him to see if he would share his pictures with us. And not only did he share his pictures, he shared his knowledge, and it made the blog post so much more interesting. And ever since then, we have been really hoping that we could find a way to do a program with us. So when we started the speaker series, we knew that we wanted to invite him. So we're very excited to have him here. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Renee. I'm glad to be here.
We're very glad to see you. And we are very excited to be talking about kazoos because they are not just annoying party favors. They are so much more. So I am going to turn it over to you because I know you have a couple of things that you wanted to say before we jumped into our conversation.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that the earliest kazoo was from Africa. And that's kind of a surprise, especially because it was a very serious instrument. used in masked ceremonies where the voice was also masked, and only one person was allowed to be the kazoo player. And the kazoo most likely was made out of an animal horn or a gourd hollowed out. And the vibrating membrane was most likely made out of spider egg silk. And it was apparently quite a dramatic sound and a very important part of a very solemn ceremony. And since then, the kazoo has turned into quite the party favor and quite a group activity. And maybe that's why it was always a solo player in that serious ceremony, because you have more chance to regain control of your serious ceremony, it seems to me, when only one person is playing. And the kazoo probably was first seen in America for a large public at a state fair. In fact, it was at a Georgia state fair in the 1840s. There was a gentleman who had a booth, and his name was Alabama Vest. And in keeping with its roots, Alabama Vest, he was an African-American gentleman, and he was the one, apparently, who introduced the kazoo to a large audience through that fair. And he had some help from a Swiss clockmaker to get it started as a business where they truly made kazoos in kind of a factory setting. And that's when it really all began. And it was quite a novelty, and anyone could play it. Now, mind you, I think you know this, Renee. You can't just blow into a kazoo. That's not how it works. So many people get a kazoo and they grab it and they think they can get away with just blowing into it, and nothing happens. Trust me. You have to hum into it, or better yet, say the word kazoo, because then you're actually voicing, you're actually humming, and that's what makes the little skinny paper resonator resonate and creates that distinctive sound. And one of my favorite early kazoos looks a lot like an early microphone, which is important to notice because your museum has a very important kazoo recording.
Yes.
Using state-of-the-art recording equipment for the time, where it was captured. And this kazoo, this little skinny paper kazoo, reminds me a lot of the kind of equipment that might have been used. It actually looks like an old school microphone head. And there's just a little paper resonator. And there always was some sort of a paper cone or paper technology with these instruments, whether through the playback or the recording. And this one, you just hold up to your mouth, and if you talk into it, it sounds like an old school radio broadcast in a way. And I just love this Singing Sam kazoo. It's a Singing Sam microphone kazoo. It really does remind me of an old school microphone. And of course, I thought of your museum immediately, because those important recording sessions that are the birth of your museum had technology that looked kind of like this. And kazoos can be made out of a lot of materials. Here's a little tin kazoo. Tin is very popular. And does this one have a working resonator? Not really. But this paper version hopefully does have a resonator that's working. No, it doesn't. I should have tested this out earlier. But the thing about a paper resonator is that it can be repaired. And I'm going to wait to reveal how to repair it closer towards the end when some questions are asked. But there are a lot of kazoos that look like saxophones, like this one. And that's because in early recording technology, the kazoo sounded a lot like a saxophone. Oh, there must be so much humidity today dealing with this. And look at all these saxophones that I have with me, even this very super colorful one. And this one, the resonator is working a bit. It is wonderful. We'll talk about repairs later. And I will send some of these to the repair shop after this show. But I love that these early tin kazoos were often made to look like legitimate instruments because it was just that much more fun for people to play on them because they seemed like an instrument. Like, here's a trumpet kazoo. This is a fairly modern one, but it's built to the specifications of an old design. And it even has fake little valves that you can press. That's just for show, just for fun to press these. Does the resonator work on this? And of course, if you press the valves, it's quite even more impressive, it seems to me. Yes. And I love this trumpet one.
So, Scott, let me interrupt you to ask a quick question.
Yes.
You mentioned the fact that our museum has a connection to a historic kazoo recording.
Yes.
And kazoos were often found in jug bands. That was a pretty common place to find them, and used mostly for comedy and novelty songs, at least within hillbilly music.
Yes.
And at the 1927 Bristol Sessions, that's the kind of song that you find the kazoo in. It was the Old Time Corn Shuckin' Parts 1 and 2 by the Blue Ridge Corn Shuckers, which was one of the groups that Ernest Stoneman formed. And it is a novelty song because it's him getting various friends and family to play different instruments and sing little bits of the song, but they're also passing around the jug. And we all know what was supposedly in that jug is probably moonshine. But I wanted you, because there is a piece that you wanted to show us tonight that connects to another instrument that is often in jug bands, and that is the washboard. And so you had a piece that you were going to demonstrate for us. So I thought that would be a good time to hear that.
Here's my super oversized washboard, which I wear like this. And when you're doing the wash, I think it's always in a modern era. It's very important to have quarters. So instead of little thimbles or little clothespin, I think we use quarters to make the sound. And yes, I'll use a kazoo. I think I'll use this official Happy National Kazoo Day kazoo. And there also will be some bubbles for this performance. And in fact, if the camera gets a little crazy, it's because the cameraman is going to try to blow bubbles and film at the same time. So we'll see. So this song is called Laundry Day. And don't worry, it's short. So I do need some bubbles as an intro. They need to be in front of the camera. Oh, excellent.
So Scott, we can't actually hear we can't actually hear it for some reason.
I'll come closer. Oh, now.
I think it may actually be distorting the microphone, so further away might be better.
Yeah, that's better. So Scotty, can you give some suggestions real quick?
Yeah, I think it's just too loud for the it's overloading the phone's microphone.
Quiet.
Yeah, and I tried. There's also a thing on original sound, for better audio, and I tried that, but it's not making a difference. So maybe have the camera person back off just a bit again and try it.
Okay. One last time for Laundry Day. And really keep my hands there. Okay. How is that, Scotty?
We could hear a bit of it, just depending on where the phone was located. So I guess we should try.
Well, maybe the other pieces where we're not forcing the camera in to also be bubble soaked.
Yeah.
We'll hope and pray, but we'll continue on. What topic would you like to talk about next, Renee?
Well, I know that we're going to do quite a bit more show and tell in a minute, but why? One of the things I wanted to know, because I think that one of the things about the kazoo, and you mentioned this earlier, is that the kazoo is often viewed as this novelty item. It's often, in the past, it's one of those things that parents remember bringing home with their kids from parties as a birthday party favor and that type of thing. But it has this much more serious historical origins that come from Africa. And I think there's also a connection to Mexico. Am I right about that?
Yeah, there are some instruments from central Mexico that were unearthed that are kind of like a recorder, like a tube with holes in it, a whistle that you blow through. And there were bits of corn husk that drape over some of the holes. And that creates a buzzy sound and an extra timbre that is very kazoo-like. And people were very excited to see that. And that is considered one of the very, very, very early kazoos as well. And they're having trouble dating it, but it's from a couple previous centuries ago. And it was just so exciting to read about that. And that instrument in that part of the world. Yes.
Well, and because you had mentioned about fixing that there are ways to repair a kazoo today with the membrane, and I know we're going to come back to that because there's an interesting surprise in that story. But it sounds to me like with the African and the Central Mexican ones, you said, what was it? Spider egg silk with the African ones,
yes,
and corn husk. That sounds so delicate.
Yeah.
Is that more hardy than I would think?
I'm surprised that they knew that was some of the materials involved. There must have been just like fragments, remnants of those items draping, those vibrating materials draping off of them to know. Yeah, that was it. And we may as well confess how the way to fix a modern kazoo. Obviously, there's a few here on the counter today that I want to repair. And the best way to quickly repair them is to go to the public restroom and steal one of the toilet seat covers from the back, okay? Take from the back of that container. And you just snip out a little circle, and then you just place it where the kazoo is. Let's see if I can show you what that might look like. Is it here? No, here. Here it is. This is one where you can easily replace the little item. You can see that there's a little hinge here, and I could undo this. This one does need to be replaced. I could undo this, and you can see that there's a little piece of paper in there. I could dump it out if I had to. So this one's easily repaired. And I recommend the classic waxy toilet seat cover. And their official logo is a little buzzy bee. So that makes sense. But I'm sure waxy people have no idea that that's how I repair my kazoos. And it's free because you just pilfer it. Shh.
Well, but you did also point out to us that you should probably take one from further back than the top one.
Wax paper, from home. And in fact, you can probably just use like fancy typing paper that's got a lot of cotton in it. Like if you're submitting a thesis, they usually ask for a lot of cotton content in your fancy paper. They want it to be acid free and certain kind of cloth content. And those work well too. But you can just experiment. In fact, even just a regular piece of paper folded around a comb, can become a pretty darn good emergency kazoo. But it's so much.
We've done that with kids before. Done like little impromptu kazoo making at the museum. So And I do like to make that noise.
Happy when the kids went home with the kazoos that they made.
Yeah, that's when the parents aren't happy with us, but we're happy and the kids are happy. So before we jump into some more show and tell, Scott, you mentioned that one of the first things, or I mentioned when I was doing your introduction, is that you started off these kazoo events at the library. But how did you sort of get into kazoos into the first place? Was this something that you had liked when you were younger and you just kept learning about it, or did it arise through your work at the library?
Yeah, I always liked kazoos, but I didn't necessarily collect them. That started at the library, at Geisel Library, named after Dr. Seuss. And because we're named after Dr. Seuss, I can kind of get away with some pretty funky events. But we are a serious research library. And so this kazoo exploration was kind of done on a dare to create a study break that was funky, but one that was inspired by research using very serious research tools at a research library to uncover unusual facts about something, pretty mundane. The kazoo. What could we find out about a kazoo that would be a surprise to people? Oh my God, so many surprises. The fact that it comes from Africa, the fact that there was some instruments in Mexico that were very kazoo-like, the fact that speech therapists use kazoos to do some work with patients. In fact, there's a certain kind of surgeries, like sometimes tonsillectomies, where afterwards the patients have trouble relaxing the back of their throat and being able to regain their regular old voice. They're all sort of closed off. And what some speech therapists noticed is that if they practiced with the kazoo a little bit, then everything kind of got reset and that closed off aspect was fixed. Another reason why kazoos work well with speech therapists is for children, they might be very, very, very shy and not want to do certain kind of exercises or certain kind of communication. But most children are probably willing to play a kazoo, especially when they find the secret about how you have to voice it. You can't just blow, you have to voice this kazoo. And that can be fun for children. And it really engages them. And that's when further work with a therapist and a child can go further. So that was interesting to see. And there were a lot of research papers along those lines that we actually printed out and showed. So that was interesting.
And when it's with the speech therapy, does it also build, I don't know, this is probably a silly question, but does it build any like muscles that help your vocal cords? Does it help with that? Is that some of it? Is it just people who might need to sort of engage those muscles or whatever it is that help your vocal cords work? Or is that just not connected at all? Is it just the sort of...
I agree. I'm not a speech therapist, but I agree with what you say, is that there's a certain amount of control that you have to intend to successfully play a kazoo. There are a lot of people who can't play a kazoo.
And the reason why
I don't really understand what a voiced versus a non-voiced phonetics are. Like a P is an unvoiced B, bilabial plosive B, 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 B versus P, 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 P. And there might be, some speakers who aren't good about voicing their plosives, baby, baby, baby versus P, 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 P. It's just not the same thing, is it? And that's something that working with the kazoo could help develop to encourage the actual voicing of so means.
And it's interesting because my mother had she had an operation a few years back that affected her vocal cords, and she can't speak very loudly now. And I think I'm going to have to try and take a kazoo home from the museum store and see if that helps her, even though I'm not sure I want my mother playing a kazoo regularly at home, but it might help.
And Scotty, your colleague Scotty even mentioned that he he had something going on with him where there was a certain kind of therapy that they had to do for him involving his speech. And he also agreed to head the zoo.
I have a nodule on one of my vocal cords, and I had to do speech therapy, and they were teaching me how to resonate through my face instead of my, vocal cords and my diaphragm. So, yeah.
Yes. So I rest your case, Scotty. I rest your case.
So let's do a little bit more show and tell. You were going to show us a lot of different types of kazoos because you've been collecting them for how long now?
Oh, since before you were born, Renee. A long time. A lot of different technology involved and a lot of surprises. Let's, since you represent an audience that is very excited about country, let's start with a more agrarian theme. Let's see, I've got a kazoo that I want to show you. Let's see. You can't get more agrarian than a tractor, and I know I had one. Well, let's start with our train. This onomatopoetic train where I actually could. Could you hear that at all, Scotty?
Yes, that was perfect.
Oh, so maybe there's some.
So I think that it was actually the washboard that was the problem.
That was ruining everything. Okay.
Which is, some people would argue that the washboard often ruins things. So.
Okay, so maybe there's some.
I was going to say the same, Renee, but I didn't want to say it out loud.
Okay, so maybe there's some hope for some of these other ones. But I love these more onomatopoetic ones. Like here's an old school crop duster. And even though you're supposed to play in the larger hole, some people think you're supposed to play like a little tipperella, the small part in your mouth. But it's actually the larger part. But for this, let's play in the smaller part just so it looks more like a crop duster. Versus. Now you know why you need to go in the larger one, not necessarily just because it's larger, but because it's closer to the resonator. The side you blow has to be very close to where the resonator is. Although both ends work. If someone tells you to play quieter, maybe playing it the wrong way. That's the way to go. Here's a barrel kazoo, which is a very fun design. It looks like a little barrel. And again, let's see. Well, this one needs some repair work. I'm so sorry, but I'll find another barrel one hiding here. Scotty really liked these hamazoos. What color was your hamazoo that you had, Scotty?
I'm pretty sure it was blue, but...
Okay, well, hold on to that. It's valuable because I don't have a blue one. But you can see where I blow. They're not being very responsive. But here's a very exciting one that came from McDonald's, probably in the 70s. There's Ronald McDonald. We can barely make him out. And on the back, it almost looks like a little smiley face. Well, almost smiley face. How's this one working? Pretty good. So sometimes it's important to keep the packaging because this one comes right out and says that it's a rock and roll twist kazoo. So thank goodness I kept this packaging.
So
it's indeed a rock.
Scott, you said that you had quite a few agrarian ones. Is that a really common design for a certain period, or is that something that happened just has happened throughout, or does it sort of tie itself into some of those early uses of the kazoo and this hillbilly music? Is that how those? Yeah.
It does tie into the hillbilly and in the roots of the state fair where they were designed. My agrarian ones that I showed you and Scotty the other day might still be in a bag. Might be in that bag. Who knows? So when I come across them, there's a yellow corn on the cob and there's a tractor, and he was looking through an extra bag just to see it. But yeah, it's fun to celebrate those roots. There's the cow. I didn't take it out of the packaging, but Renee particularly liked this moo moo kazoo, the cow. Again, going with the agrarian theme. So wonderful. And I might come across these other ones. You can also find, oh, and Peter found the tractor. I'll take it out of the bag so you really appreciate it. Look at the spectacular green tractor. So wonderful. What a fan of the green tractor with this. I'm surprised the corn on the cob isn't in there, Peter. It's yellow. Oh, Popeye is also very popular. Popeye's fight.
So,
Thank you.
one more question for you, Scott.
Yes.
Do you mind to hold up the tractor again?
Here you are.
Yeah, so I'm thinking like that one, the tractor and the crop duster in particular, all of the decorative bits that make the actual shape of whatever item it is, they're just extras, right? The kazoo itself is still basically the shape that we're familiar with, and then the others are sort of extras. They're not contributing to it in any way. Is that correct?
Right. It's basically the standard submarine shape is all you need. You can see the other stuff is added on. Although, quite cleverly, the other stuff that's added on are also part and parcel of how a kazoo is made. Like these two front wheels are one of the resonators before a hole is cut out. Can you tell?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And this hood is actually, part of the submarine shape, but repurposed to become, the chassis where the engine is going to be. Right. So, and these come from the American Kazoo Company, based in Eden, New York, and they're considered one of the first kazoo factories in the country, and they're still churning out kazoos, and they have a lovely museum. I really have to go there. And also,
can you repeat what the name of the company was again?
The Great American Kazoo Company in Eden, New York. This is one that Scotty really liked that we saw. And it's a beautiful fish. This one was made in Japan. And it's so beautiful and so elegant.
Oh, that is nice.
Scales that are embossed in it. Oh, just wonderful. I wonder if the resonator's working. Pretty good working.
Yeah, that sounded nice.
Such a beautiful. And there's another fish one that I want to show you that I really appreciate. This one has a very special resonator. It's a plastic kazoo because the future is in plastics. And you can see it's a very handsome fish. And the resonator is this cardboard instruction sheet that tells you, sing into Singin' Sam's mouth. Imitate any instrument by singing high or low to change the tone. And oh, by the way, to change the tone, hold his tail, touch his fins. Let's find out. So I'm going to push the resonator back in. This is made in England. And so I push it. And it wants me to push the tail. So it has a certain amount of timbral options. Singing Sam, the musical fish. So it's, and I love that the resonator is the actual instructions. How wonderful. And yes.
I was going to say, before we look at some more, because I know that you also had some more that you wanted to show us. Do you want to try another musical interlude first? And because the one I was quite interested in, especially again, because there's a connection to our museum, is the Raven Radio Recital.
Yes. I do a lot of old school radio and sound effects in my work. And that's why I really have to come visit your museum and your radio station.
You would be great on one of our radio shows.
Right across country. And I do often use a kazoo to represent the sound of a raven. The raven can have a very woody, low, rattly sound. And this one doesn't have a resonator, so I won't use that. Perhaps I'll just use, maybe this wazoo. Have I used this one yet? This one might work. So this one I'll try to be very guttural and kind of like, when people talk and they fry. So it's kind of, that would be the technique. And I'll just give you a little excerpt. Let's start, though, by using this official umbrella from your gift shop. This actually has your logo on it. Let's open it up. The special magical button I push. Way over here, actually. I'm not sure I can force it open, maybe. Oh, no, there's a button. The download. Oh, here it is. It's on the handle. I'm glad it's not a downpour where I don't know what's going on. Boom! Boom. Let me do it with one hand. Because in old school radio, it's important to have the flapping of wings, and that's best done with an umbrella, where you just take the umbrella and you unluckily open it indoors and... Well, that sounds pretty good. Does that sound okay on your microphones? So that would represent the flying of the raven. And then we liked the wazoo. Well, I'll just use this map. This one is okay. And whenever I do a raven for radio, there's always a lot of mystery, a lot of Edgar Allan poetry involved. So I'm going to turn on my theremin, which is very much like early technology. So I'm going to turn this switch on as I disappear. Mimi mama moo. I'll flip the switch. And the theremin can be a spooky instrument. Let's see if it's going to work. Do you want more volume?
Maybe just a little bit.
How about that, Scotty? Is that better?
That might have gone up a bit too much and blown it out again. I could hear it better at the lower volume.
So this is just the entrance of the kazoo. So please remember that I already did the bird flap. You just in your own minds hear the bird flap, and then and I probably would also, that same radio recital of the raven, he would also do a piece with harp. But I'll set the harp's pedals so that it has a very dramatic tonality. Harps have many harps have pedals on the bottom. That's how you get your sharps and flats. And so for this, I'm gonna go down, middle, down, up, middle, and that should be a very dramatic modality. So here's the radio raven singing a frightful song. That should serve as an example of what I would do as a very odd raven radio recital.
Well, and we do a radio show here at the museum on our radio station, Radio Bristol, called Mountain Song and Story, and she often does sound effects when she's telling some of her stories, and so hopefully she'll bring the kazoo into her repertoire now.
And I hope your gift shop will start selling kazoo. I know that your gift shop sells kazoo in person, but it's not on your website yet, and you need to sell kazoo on your website.
So you were going to show us a few more. You showed us a few of the ones that look like instruments, but there's some also that are associated with different characters. Is that correct?
Yes, I have Woody Woodpecker here, which is very exciting to have. You can see how spectacular he is. And it's even his little beat moves. Ha, 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 ha. Let's see now, is there a resonator that's working? I think so. Did that sound okay, Scotty?
It did, yeah.
Good, thank you.
When the kazoo's on its own, it's working quite well. So I think it's just maybe the other instruments are blowing it out. Yeah.
Theremin.
I think the kazoo just wants to be a solo instrument tonight.
I agree entirely. And I already showed you the McDonald's.
And you mentioned Popeye as another one.
Yes, I do have Popeye. He's right here. He doesn't have a resonator, so I won't play him. But here's Popeye's pipe, which is holding Popeye with his pipe. Surreal. And there's one more Popeye's pipe. This one, maybe. Let's see. This one is reminiscent of Popeye's pipe. It does have a resonator. No, but that's okay. And I might stumble across more. And here is, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with the latest technology, a cassette. Play along with. And they're basically the colors associated with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Oh, that's exciting. And here's another celebrity, Mozart's kazoo. And it's red.
Who knew that Mozart was a kazoo player?
And there's a sonata for kazoo, apparently. And this is also exciting. Here is a duet with tambourine and kazoo featuring the California Raisins.
Okay. So let me go back to that sonata for a minute, because I'm guessing that's a parody and not.
Yes, it's not.
So is it meant to be a more classical sounding piece, despite the fact that it's a parody, the sonata?
Yeah, because I can see there's an Alberti bass in here, and a Mannheim rocket. Those are musical terms for different. So I'm not sure that la hoo ha hey hey la ha ha hey la ha. I should play like a kazoo instead of singing.
I mean,
this.
I can.
People pay me not to sing. So, but yeah, this is probably a famous Mozart sonata that somehow I'm not recognizing. I'm enjoying it though, but not necessarily recognizing. Maybe I'll play it on my largest kazoo, the wazoo. Is that too loud for you, Scotty?
No, it's good.
And I played that for you at no extra charge, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, and it leads me to my next question then, Scott, which is, you've just played a Mozart sonata with your kazoo, but can you just give us a general sort of idea, sort of the place of the kazoo in a timeline of music, like the types of music you might find people playing kazoos and when that happened?
Yes, I guess what I could do is I could go through some little slides that were once created for one of my exhibits, and various celebrities and celebrity composers and famous people who have had some success with kazoo over the many years. San Diego had a country band, a punk country band called the Beat Farm, and they had a big hit locally. And I think it was even played on real live radio stations all over, called Happy Boy. And they featured kazoo, which was very exciting. And Beck, in the intro to Steal My Body Home, from the album Mellow Gold, there's a long jug band interlude with the kazoo, of course. And the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, as you might imagine, they have featured kazoo in as early as 1967. Oh, and for more country people, Toby Keith. Kazoo is featured in his interestingly titled album, White Trash with Money. But the kazoo was actually played by Laurie White. So a lady kazoo player is always fun to be featured. And back in the era of your museum and some of the jug bands and early country and even jazz, Red McKenzie and his Mound City Blue Blowers, they were a jazz band of the 20s, and they featured kazoo a lot. And because of that recording technology, you probably thought it was a trombone. You probably thought it was a saxophone, because with that earliest technology and the way the microphones reacted to things and the way the speakers reenacted things, there was a naive quality where a gorgeous trombone ended up sounding like a delightful kazoo. The Monkees featured kazoo quite late in their career when only two members were involved with the group. Michael Nesmith and Peter Tork had left the band, but the remaining two on a particular year in the 70s featured kazoo in a song. Creedence Clearwater Revival. Some of these bands, you would guess that they would feature kazoo because they harken back to very early jazz or even a jug band aesthetic. I was surprised that Dion, the 1950s crooner, there's a kazoo solo. Peter, Paul, and Mary, 1967, I'm in love with a big blue frog. That makes sense that they would use kazoo in that song. And the Kinks in 1969, they used a kazoo. Oh, and Jimi Hendrix quite famously used a kazoo-like instrument. He was doing a recording session working with a very faulty speaker with a broken paper cone, a damaged paper cone. It has such a buzzy, awful quality, but he loved it. And so he used the bad speaker and then even made it sound worse by quickly fashioning a kazoo-like instrument with a comb and paper to really enhance that odd, naive quality in the album Electric Ladyland. In the song was Crosstown Traffic. That was 1969. And there are early examples. Del Shannon, So Long Baby, for his 1961 single featured. Oh, and Pink Floyd even. And again, that was probably the very late 60s or 70s. Had a kazoo. Oh, and here's a nostalgic photo that I ended up buying on eBay. And it shows just a now anonymous country school teacher who is delightfully playing kazoo in her kitchen/parlor at home. That's delightful. Wish I knew who she was. And so a lot of pop culture, a lot of, there was a kazoo concerto that was written for a special Leonard Bernstein concert. Remember when he used to do sort of Young People's Guide to the Orchestra concerts? Well, I've got a picture of Anita Darian practicing kazoo for a kazoo concerto that she premiered at a Leonard Bernstein concert where he was conducting. And the composer's there too, so let's give him a shout out. Oh, Mark Bucci. I would love to have been there. It's fun to have these old press photos because they'll show you the actual press photo and then the serving suggestion of the press release as well. And it's fun to have those as historic documents. So lots of examples of kazoo through the time. Oh, and here is that kazoo museum in Eden, New York, the original kazoo company. Boy, we got to go there, Renee. We'll go there. When I go to your radio station some year, we'll do a side trip. And look, This for sure even shows one of the original kazoo patents. That's always exciting to see.
Mm.
It's really fun to go back to an actual patent to see what the intentions were. And that's when you'd find out, oh, you're supposed to go into the big end. In fact, that's the only reason why people know which end of the toilet paper roll is it supposed to go over or under. The answer is over because I've seen the patent.
So, Scott, you mentioned Anita Darien. So a lot, when you were going through the pictures, we were often talking about people who've used the kazoo sort of on a one-off sort of novelty basis on one of their songs. But are there actual musicians out there who have sort of specialized in kazoo music?
Yes. Yes, there is. In fact, there's a book. There's a book over here. And I'm walking. And it's probably underneath here. It's Barbara Stewart's book. The Complete How to Kazoo by the late, great Barbara Stewart. She was a musician who did specialize in kazoo, and she appreciated the novelty of it. So she did her performances with a lot of humor, but she really did rehearse, and she really did do a Carnegie Hall recital, a legitimate Carnegie Hall recital. She had to practice and everything. And she wrote this delightful book and did a certain amount of other publishing too, and certainly did a lot of recording featuring legitimate classical music that she rearranged, shall we say, for kazoo. But yeah, she was great. And
that reminds me a little bit of someone I saw when I was over in England, the Ukulele Orchestra of Great Britain, which sort of takes other songs that are really popular or classical and then puts them to the ukuleles for that novelty. But it's really beautiful, actually.
Yes, and sometimes what might be considered a limitation in an instrument opens some unusual doors.
Yes,
makes it so transcendent. It's like the opposite of what you expect, that doors are opened and windows are opened despite the limitations of the instrument. And the ukulele is definitely a wonderful instrument. And so is, I say. In fact, one of my favorite times that I noticed kazoo was Mr. Rogers was taught how to play kazoo by the wonderful African-American storyteller, Ella Jenkins. Here they are learning how to play kazoo, Ella Jenkins and Mr. Rogers. When I did my exhibit, we put this on a loop, and it was just delightful to see them and hear them playing kazoo.
And was there someone, I think when we were talking about this beforehand, you mentioned someone, and I can't remember his name now, but he sort of had a cowboy persona?
Yes. Bob Burns, who was a big star of early radio, and he often performed as a traveling cowboy character, and later more of a urbane, golden radio guy. But his career is really established as being a traveling Arkansas kind of cowboy hat wearing guy. And this was the instrument that you could buy. It shows him on it. This instrument you could buy from him. His instrument really was more trombone-like, and you really did play it like a brass instrument. But when you bought the toy version, it was a kazoo, and it had a little slide that would make it. This is just for show when it gets bigger and smaller. Does it work? Pretty much. But he auditioned for the radio with all of his prepared material on his bazooka, it was called, his trombone-like instrument, which inspired this kazoo-like instrument, also called the. And Renee, you were so disappointed when I told you that the bazooka weapon actually was named after Bob Burns' bazooka, the instrument, and you felt bad that a beautiful, fun musical instrument would later, the name would be taken and used for a weapon. You felt kind of bad about that.
I did. It made me sad.
And I made a discovery, Renee. Look at this piece of ordnance. It's a spent shell from a rifle of some sort, and it was turned into a kazoo. So you see, Barbara, Renee, it goes both ways.
That makes me feel better.
Our stewardess overtook me for a second. So, and there's also some wonderful games you can play with kazoo. And some of them are quite interestingly packaged. Here's Kazoo That Tune. Most of these games are all name that tune kind of games. And this one is made to look like an oversized cassette. Play that tune. Oversized cassette. Mm-hmm. That's my jam. Featuring a lot of modern songs. Here's the most sophisticated of all those games. Tuned In. It looks like a big piano keyboard. You can see that. And it's got a board and dice, and all of them tend to have a little hourglass because you have only so long to fortunately, you have only so long to put it in.
And I guess the way that you play those is that you're sort of having to reproduce the tune on your kazoo as part of the game.
There are cards that say a song, a pop song or a country song, just a big selling song. Even a Beyonce song is featured on one of these games, I know that. And you have to play the song and someone has to recognize it, which can be trying.
Yes.
But it's always injury-free, I'm sure. Oh, there's also a lot of kazoo books, Renee. Sometimes they're just random, like this book. Looks like a regular book or a paperback book. Kazoo, musical instrument in a membranophone class, consisting of a pipe with a hole in it, which produces a buzzing sound when a player hums into it. Oh, second definition, the coolest instrument on earth. What's good about this booklet is it's just a blank notebook, but still it's fun to have. And here's another book. It's a lesson book, Crazy Kazoo, from Tiny Tutors, and it's a and it is a book that contains a kazoo and a lesson book. So that's always fun. Oh, I got some other books. Let's see. I got some books that have some girl power. Here is Nazboo's Kazoo. And it's these delightful young lady genies who discover a kazoo that has magical powers and they don't realize it. It's a good thing they're always on their best behavior because when they're playing the kazoo, magnificent things happen. Fortunately, because they're such good kids. And here's a funny one. How to Play the Kazoo and Other Poems by Rabbi B. It's always fun to have some Judaica in your library. Yes. And this one's delightful. The Pirate and the Kazoo. It's a very interesting story about a pirate leader who was misunderstood and, thrown off his ship. But he found a kazoo on this deserted island and just washed ashore. And he played it so brilliantly that the ship came back, realized they misunderstood their pirate leader, and he's taken back onto the ship, which is very nice. And here's another odd book, Aardvark and the Yellow Kazoo. And this one's quite surreal, but I love the drawings. But there's a whole library here, Learn and Play Kazoo, which had a kazoo attached to it, I'm sure. And it has some actual sheet music in it that you can play. Oh, getting back to our topic of speech therapy and whatnot, Dorita Berger wrote a legitimate book, Kids, Music, and Autism, Bringing Out the Music in Your Child. And there are kazoo exercises in here, which is delightful. Here's another one of those random books that looks like it's a book. Of course I'm awesome. I play kazoos. Like, it's just a blank notebook. But who wouldn't want a blank notebook that says that?
I feel like there could be certain books like this about the banjo too, because the banjo gets very maligned. And I love the banjo, so I love the banjo, but a lot of people malign the banjo.
Oh, in fact, banjo is even the word itself is interesting. It's an African word, because the banjo originally came from Africa, and that's fun to know. And here's a kazoo exclamation point book that is a calendar entry thing. This one is good for me to have because I can be so misbehaving. I'm diabetic and I misbehave sometimes. Not lately. I've been very good. But this is my diabetes food journal. Life is better with kazoo. And then you have to write down everything you've eaten. It's got nothing to do with kazoos. But somehow I'm willing to use this book. And remember when we saw that moo, cow, kazoo? Well, here's a book that's related. Luna Moo and Her Kazoo by Christine Pally. And often these characters are misunderstood, but in the end, they gather a family around them with their beautiful kazoo playing. Here's one last random one, which features the instrument that you and I both love, Renee, the banjo. She was this wonderful country bear playing banjo with a little duck playing kazoo, or pheasant perhaps. She's got one very telltale feather coming out of his head. And for some reason, the skull is weird, but that's another story. And it's just a calendar schedule of things you did that day, a journal entry. Oh, and it'd be nice to, as far as books go, maybe end on this one. Science Around the House. And it has a kazoo chapter on different ways to make kazoo. So, you know, the kazoo can be very educational and entertaining and a good theme in literature. I'm just trying to tell you. And, you know, kazoo can be for all ages. Here's another typical press photo that still is making the rounds. This wonderful kazoo band featuring some players of a certain age. Oh, and here's our friend Bob Burns again. This is when he was transferred over from his Arkansas traveling cowboy to more sophisticated radio personality with lots of hair product. If you can't have a tall hat, have tall hair. That's for sure. And how delightful to have some sheet music. Can you kazoo? For two. And it's a whole
kazoo duets.
Duets. When we meet up, Renee, some year soon, you know,
we'll do a duet together.
We sure will. And here's some more classical music that features kazoo in very serious settings, often used to relay a metaphor. Often it'd be a very serious mass with a boys' choir, but one of the boys maybe would be playing kazoo, and that can be very touching. When there's an oversized symphony, it's very serious music, but then there's all of a sudden there's a boys' choir, and one of the boys holds his kazoo. I mean, that just tugs at your heart.
Mm. Well, and that made me think of something. Is that you mentioned, or when I was doing your intro, we mentioned that during one of your exhibits at the library, you did have an original kazoo composition. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. I had one that the late, great Ryoko Amade Gogen wrote for me. It was a jazzy one. And her middle name was pilfered from Amadeus, from Mozart. And another, it's always good to support women composers. Another women composer, Linda Kiernahan, wrote a round for as many kazoos as you wish. And she wrote it on the plane because I told her I had to have a new piece to premiere at the festival. And she wrote it on the plane as she was headed to the Grammys as a reporter, as a classical music reporter. And it was so glamorous to have faxed over to me this round for as many kazoos as possible from Linda. It was so great to have that. And I might come across it here to show you, but I love the piece. It's just wonderful. And yeah, there are ways to use a kazoo, not too liberally, but just the right amount. It can be so delightful. There's a graphical score that a modern composer did where you have to watch as these little blips dance around the screen, go up and down and twirl. And there are instructions on what to do on your kazoo. It was for, I think, 10 kazoos. And each of the 10 items that were floating around were color-coded and numbered. And so everyone had to follow their own little bouncing ball, as it were. And it was a very sophisticated piece. People were very surprised. You didn't necessarily have to know how to read music, because if the ball floated up, you just went higher. And if the ball floated down, you went lower. And if it floated around, maybe you did a little vibrato. And it was so much fun for people. And that's what's fun about kazoo is people are going to have low expectations from you if you play it, but you can surprise them, can't you? You sure can.
Well, so Scott, we're probably at the end of our time now. Is there anything before we go to the question and answer that we have missed talking about that you would like to share?
Oh, no. Yeah, here's a configured mine. This is just a little inexpensive kazoo, just a typical annoying party favor. But I bought this from someone in Italy, and it probably was originally a 29-cent kazoo. And I spent a lot more than that because I was shipped with me. But look at the unusual shape, and it's just so delightful. I don't know if the resonator. The resonator's working, so that's nice. And I showed this to an Italian friend of mine who wasn't familiar with the word kazoo, and she was a little alarmed because kazoo in Italian means something kind of dirty, not filthy. Okay. So let's just leave it at that. You can look it up, everybody. I'm not going to talk about it.
Well, before we move on to the questions, we were going to show everyone the kazoo in our collection upstairs, yes, which is actually from, I think, Kazubi Kazoos is yes, where we sourced it.
They're my favorite maker of kazoos, the Kazubi Kazoo people.
Yes.
They made the big one that I had those kind of, yeah.
Yes, and it's just the classical kazoo. It's in that typical, what you call the submarine shape. It doesn't have any embellishments. It's just sort of the classical sort of idea of the kazoo. And then I think Scotty was also going to play for us about a minute from Blue Ridge Corn Shuckers' Old Time Corn Shuckin' Part 1 and 2, where the kazoo is played. And remember what I said when I was talking about it earlier, everyone, is that it's basically a song where a bunch of different instruments and a bunch of different singers do their little solo bits while passing around a jug of something tasty.
Winkety wink.
Yes, winkety wink is correct. So, Scotty, I will hand that over to you to play that real quick.
Not too much. The rest of us wants a little bit. Hello, here's Ernest Storman and Boren Frost from Music Holler. Come on, boys. Show your stuff and give us a few jerks of the roving gambler.
It was great to jaw harp too.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to put in all of the sort of little novelty, small portable instruments that were included in that clip. So you had the harmonica, obviously, at the beginning, the jaw harp, and then the kazoo as the final instrument.
Thank you for playing that.
Well, this has been a delightful hour-long exploration of the kazoo and all of its many wondrous appearances throughout history and throughout usage. I mean, to me, the speech therapy thing is one of the most interesting things that I learned about the kazoo when I spoke to you and you sort of shared so much information with us for the blog post. But also just the fact that the kazoo, which seems to be such a modern instrument, or modern in the sense of like, I could imagine it coming about in the 1950s, for instance, is actually a much more ancient instrument with a much more serious purpose and history.
And how delightful that it had a chance to become a star in the 20s in the flapper era, and where it probably got its most misbehaving reputation. And then the more kitschy 50s, how wonderful. And then the sort of more performance art chic situation in classical music and elsewhere in the 70s, and with some of those heady rock bands in the 80s that were just wanting to push some buttons in a different way. So yeah, the kazoo's has had a good run, and it's still going strong. And how delightful that our hour together was relatively injury-free, except for the washboard incident. Sorry, everybody.
It's okay. We expect such things from a washboard, so it's fine. But I think we do have a few questions in the chat, so I'm going to hand it over to Scotty to run through those. And Scotty, I actually also got a question. Someone sent me as a direct message, so once you've gone through yours, I'll do that one.
All right. Yeah, I really enjoyed your presentation, and I think it's time for a kazoo renaissance, personally. But
yes.
Hear, hear.
Well, and what it really brought to mind for me is like the golden age of cartoons, like that I used to watch growing up, like the Hanna-Barbera and things like that. For some reason, and with it was with the harp part, and it's really neat to think about people in the studio actually using those instruments to kind of go over these animated things. But I have a question.
Yes, right.
So, what do you know? Are there any like artisan kind of kazoo makers? And like, do you know what the most valuable kazoo ever sold was?
I don't have it with me, but my favorite artisan kazoo is from Spike Jones, not the filmmaker Spike Jones, but the vaudevillian performer from the 50s and earlier and later. He had a plastic pink kazoo that looked like a saxophone, which had a very unusual resonator that you put it on the top as if it was a sheet of music. And that is worth something to me. And it is kind of worth something because the advertisements for it were so delightful. And if you can find the actual instrument, it looks just like what you saw in the ads. And so I like that. But there are also kazoos makers that make them out of beautiful, handsome wood. And they even sell wood wax so that you can keep it healthy and beautiful.
Yeah, keep it in good shape.
And then, of course, there's the gentleman who runs Kazoobie Kazoos, which are so delightful, and they take their kazoos very seriously. And then that kazoo company in Eden, New York, look how seriously they take kazoos in their history, that they would use parts of kazoos to create this delightful tractor, in that plane, and that corn on the cob that I never found, although I found an allusion to the corn on the cob. And I think most of these kazoos have sentimental value that's beyond what you can imagine. I'd like to think that the beautiful fish that you like so much, Scotty, I'd like to think this is maybe worth something, but I'm just lucky to have it.
I do think that one had a particularly good sound as well.
Yes. And the Popeyes pipe ones are surprisingly easy to find. Sometimes it's surprising. Oh boy, this must be so hard to find. And then you see it all over, which doesn't lessen its sentimental value. That's for sure.
Well, so we do have a couple of questions in the chat.
Very good.
The first one from Bill Beal. And he asks, are there any categories of music or instruments that you found translate particularly well to kazoo?
Certainly, the earliest flapper era kind of jazzy tunes that would have been recorded by very naive equipment and broadcast over kind of naive equipment, like a megaphone turntable or very early radio. Somehow that the newness of that technology and how flattering the kazoo, the naive kazoo sounded on that new technology, that's a very special time for me. You know, I was so looking forward to our 20s and a quick week. God, you know, I love the 1920s. And I waited for our 2020s, and I'm not impressed. But it'll get better. It'll get better, I promise. I think even the original 1920s didn't start out so great either. So hang on, everyone. We're going to have some fantastic 20s. And the kazoo will be there for us, that's for sure.
You know, it makes me a couple of styles of music, or I guess they're very similar, but like klezmer and zydeco, it seems like kazoo would maybe fit in really well.
Yes, because you know, klezmer. One of my favorite definitions of klezmer is Jewish soul music, and it really is soulful, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
But it can feature a lot of naive instruments, and kazoo is very welcome, you know, there. And yeah, for instance, I love that kazoo poem that Rabbi B wrote in one of my books. So yeah, klezmer is wonderful storytelling music, and the kazoo belongs there, that's for sure. And then, yes, zydeco. You know, any word with a Z in it is kazoo friendly. Don't you all agree?
And then so Thomas Anderson asks, is there any record out there for the largest kazoo orchestra? If there's not, you should really put this together, Scott.
Okay, let's see. Well, how about, you know, this Doug Washboard and Kazoo. Washboard and Kazoo's album. And then this again is one of those jug bands that Renee was talking about. This is a good representation. And here's some pictures from the 70s. The Kazoo's brothers. And it even brags on the back, the Kazoo's brothers. Plate full of kazoos. That might be representative. How about this one? This album from the Temple City Kazoo Orchestra. And look, lined up in formation.
Who knew all of this?
With their hands on their hearts.
I think the actual question was more like a Guinness Book of World Records record for kazooing.
You know, perhaps that parade they do in Pasadena, the Doodah Parade, and they feature these marching business people with briefcases. I think they could play kazoos, and they probably hold a record.
Okay.
Probably do. Oh, yes, talk about the 60s, the Gozo Band, sounds that are happening. They're probably the most mobile.
Scott, I have just looked up the Guinness Book of World Records, and I typed in kazoo, and let me tell you what it says. The largest kazoo ensemble is 5,190 participants and was achieved as part of Big Red Nose Day, or the Big Red Nose Show in England at the Royal Albert Hall in London, England on the 14th of March, 2011.
Wow.
Good.
So there you go.
All wore their little red noses.
Did you say you had a question, Renee?
Yes. And I'll do mine, and then there's been one more question that's come in, but let me find the one. John DeGallicky, and I don't think he's actually on the call anymore, but he did have some interesting questions. One was he wanted to ask if you were familiar with the trumpet buzz wow mute, which I don't know what that is, and maybe you will.
I'll have to look into that, but I'm sure it must be a little mute that does special things, that adds
Yeah. So
Unusual timbre.
maybe we'll have a kazoos part 2. Tell us about it then.
Yeah, I can imagine. I bet it is like a mute for your. Did you say trumpet or I guess whatever? And I bet it has like kazoo membranes built in or something.
It's probably
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
a little where it probably has some sort of extra feature, perhaps like that.
Yes. But then his second question was, or his second comment, it was more of a comment. He said he really enjoyed tonight's presentation, by the way. But he said, had you heard about, or did you know about the Broadway show, the mention of the kazoo that was used in the Broadway show by Abe Burrows, How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying? And he thought that the song was called I Believe in You, that had the kazoo in it. And so
Yes.
he just wanted to know if you knew about that one.
It was the bathroom scene in the office building, and all the gentlemen were getting rid of their 5 o'clock shadows with electric razors. And the pit orchestra played kazoos to represent the sound of the razors.
Okay.
So the answer, yes, and it is. I didn't give you my real timeline today because I'm a little proprietary with it. I want to save it for a real kazoo exhibit at your museum sometime. That Broadway show, the kazoo is featured very heavily from that, and that's a delightful scene. And it's so clever to use the kazoo to represent the gentleman's electric.
Yeah, I love that idea. So
Yeah.
Scotty, did you see the last question? There's another question from Bill Beal that came up. And hello, Bill. Bill is my friend in DC.
Oh, okay. Yes. So he asks.
He says, thinking of the.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I thought that you had muted yourself, but you're fine.
Go ahead, Scotty. There's a little restraining order between Renee and that guy anyway, so go ahead.
So thinking of the primal connection between morphology and linguistics and the kazoo, are there any experimental kazoo designs that exploit different mouth, nasal, or throat positions?
I feel there's not, because there's only so much you can do timbre-wise. I do have an electric kazoo that I feed through a machine, and the machine does the changes. And you certainly can experiment around, but a lot of things like you can do a flutter tongue. Excuse me, this train working. So. And that's a flutter tongue with the tongue, but you can also do a flutter tongue with a uvula. And yes, gentlemen have a uvula. It's a thing in the I can't do it as effectively. Very good, Scotty. Very good. Could you hand him a tissue, please? So things that you can try. And good kazoo players are always experimenting around. So I don't want to discourage your friend into pursuing some of these himself, and he should share with us what he's discovered.
Well, maybe you've created a bunch of kazoo converts who will experiment and can come back and share those experiments with us later.
We'll meet up at your museum in person at a kazoo exhibit. Ready. We'll do it when you can. I'm sure that you have exhibits planned years in advance, but we can wait years. We can do it.
Well, and my last question is, do you have any sort of online presence that you would like to share with our viewers tonight?
Oh, not so. Being in the witness relocation program, it's discouraged to have online presence. But time has passed. And I think that I will establish one. Because you asked, Scotty, I will do it. And I think that all the people I'm trouble with are all behind bars now. I think I'm okay. I'm going to do it, Scotty. And, my name is Scott Paulson. It's spelled son of Paul. Yes, my father's name is Paul. And I will set something up. I am on Facebook. And I'll try to do something beyond that, Scotty, because apparently you think that's something I should do, and I trust you. So I'll do it.
All right.
Well, this has been such a wonderful evening. This has been such a wonderful evening, Scott, and we really appreciate you taking the time to share all of your knowledge, and all of your kazoos, because I know that was probably just the tip of your kazoo iceberg.
Unfortunately, yes. But at least they're small, right? I also have a piano collection, and that's a lot harder to deal with because they're, but kazoos, I think everyone should have a kazoo. In fact, when I do shows, I always give out free kazoos. And
awesome. Well, for those of you in our audience who have been with us tonight, we really, really appreciate you being here. I can see that there's several people coming through in the chat to say how much they enjoyed it and that they really loved tonight's presentation. So thank you to everyone who was here with us. Before, I think if you do become a kazoo convert, please share your tunes with us later down the line. And also, like I said, keep an eye out in the next day or two on your emails for our feedback survey. We would love to hear your thoughts and ideas for future presentations. And finally, I just want to, for those of our audience who are nearby or who are still online with us, a few things to just be aware of. Our next speaker series is going to be on Tuesday, April 5th, again at 7 p.m., again free and open to the public. We are confirming who that is in the next few days, so keep an eye out on our website to learn more about who we will be talking to on April 5th. And also on Thursday of this week, there are still tickets available for this month's Farm and Fun Time show. This month, it is at the Paramount, so it's a much bigger venue and not a much longer concert, but the main headliners, the Mavericks, will be on for a full hour-long set. And then we will also have Dallas Wayne with Red Volkart and, of course, Bill and the Bells. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And, Scotty, am I correct that is also going to be done live still where people can watch it virtually? Or is that only going to show up later?
I think as far as I know, it'll still be Facebook Live and then, later on as well. So.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for that. And then finally, if you are nearby, be sure and stop by the museum and see our new special exhibit, which also has a bit of a silly sound to it, but is very serious research, which is It'll Tickle Your Innards, A Hillbilly History of Mountain Dew, which just opened here a week ago and has already had a lot of good feedback.
People love Mountain Dew. It's got the highest caffeine content of any soda, and I appreciate that.
Yes. Well, that will be here with us through August 7th, so be sure and check it out. And again, thank you for being with us here tonight. Look out for the survey, and we hope to see you again in just a month's time. Thank you. And thank you, Scott.
Thank you.